It really began when I was a medical student, looking after a lady who had got advanced stomach cancer for which there was really no treatment in those days. When the consultant came, without even acknowledging her, he popped his bottom on the end of the bed and said, "Send her home and give her a bottle of whiskey a day," and we moved on to the next case. And I just thought, I don't know, surely there's a better way of doing this.
Initially, of course, nobody thought we'd ever be able to have a hospice. And 10 years later, we decided we could afford a hospice.
There's a lot to be proud of. Many people will tell you that our greatest teachers are our patients, and they absolutely are. And second to that are our colleagues.
But it comes back to what we provide for people at the end of their lives.
In those early visionary days, you just do it. Because you drop the pebble in the pond, and either the ripples are going to fade out or something's going to happen. When I was a young doctor, I went and heard a lecture by Dame Cecily Saunders, the founder of the hospice movement, where she explained that you could prepare both the patient and those close to them for dying, that actually those last few months or weeks could be lived to the full. Philip Pasterfield, who was the Bishop of Crediton, he got together a group of doctors, nurses, businessmen, other interested people to see if anything could be done about it, and he asked me if I would chair it. We'd arranged to have a launch. We expected a few people would turn up. The Guildhall was packed. People couldn't get in, and they were standing out in the high street, and there was a blizzard. The snow was pouring down. We needed to raise enough money, which actually was £300,000. By March of that year, we had 2 community nurses working within the 6-mile radius of Exeter Cathedral. The prevailing view at the time was that you needed hospices, you needed buildings. And we'd looked at the research which said a majority of people want to die at home and not in an institution. So we decided the first thing we would do was to try and look after people at home. The other key to the whole project was volunteers.
If you had volunteers who could come in and talk to you about the things that interested you, who could listen to your memories, who could do some of the things that you were finding difficult to do, or that could make your life light up in what otherwise was a dark time, it was going to be easier. Volunteers are not just an extra, as I see it, are an absolute essential. Of course, the nurses had amazing skills at pain control, symptom control, and looking after that side of things, but were very aware that people were much more than just their bodies. It was about helping them to enjoy the life that they had left. And once you found out what was the thing they really would love to do or to have, then we would make it happen. In all the time that I worked with hospice care in the volunteer service, there was tremendous goodwill towards hospice care and a willingness to come and help us. Volunteers would come back to me to say how much satisfaction and joy they had had in seeing the difference that they could make. Yeah.
I was invited to be part of a committee which is called Friends of Hospice Care, which was at that time the only income stream. In the early days we had street collections. We also organised a house-to-house collection. Marnie Burgoyne, who was our treasurer at the time, she and I started that. And we did concerts. We organised more recently a swimathon, about 3 years running. We always had a summer fete and a Christmas fair. One of our biggest money makers was the Saturday car park behind Dean Clark House, which raised £250,000. I've watched the changes, and sometimes everything's gone very well and sometimes it hasn't, and it's just been very interesting watching how it's got bigger and bigger. And of course initially it has this strange name, hospice care, with ISCA in the middle. ISCA was highlighted initially because we were based in Exeter. People wonder why we have this peculiar spelling, but it's very much that it was an Exeter start, and the ISCA is still there in the middle of it. I really think this is a wonderful charity, and it's doing great work, and I think the people involved with it are hardworking and full of keenness about giving a good service.
In the early days, working for hospice care was 1987. I joined in the April, and it had been going for 5 years. I was the 5th nurse, and I joined an amazing existing team led by Jill Pettit, who was the senior nurse and who had started the service. And it was amazing. I was young, I was 24, had a long induction with lots of, I have to say, female matriarchs, and amazing district nurses of some note across the city, who all took me under their wing, I have to say, in the end, and showed me what community nursing was and how important end of life was to them. We were employed as a 24-hour service, and so you worked your day shifts and you also took your turn in offering on call. We had lists that Bridget would give us as to who might be available that weekend or that night, volunteering wise. So you did 1 or 2 nights a week and 1 weekend in 4 usually. And that's probably my greatest learning point, because you were out there on your own. Jill gave you a pack which had a torch in, a map, because there was sort of sat-navs in those days. We also had written notes. Usually at night the relatives would always be there to greet you. But it was quite clear we needed more than that. We needed a hospital team and we needed our own beds.
And so after 5 years we had a lot of evidence that there was a group of patients, you couldn't control their symptoms at home, the family couldn't cope. And on that basis we made the decision to build a hospice which would be the base for the community service. It would have an inpatient unit and a day unit. We were asking for £1.6 million from this community to build it, and another £1 million for the first year's running costs. My wife Elizabeth was hugely involved. The whole of the Labour Goods programme was run from our dining room. We'd be up then until 1 o'clock in the morning, making sure the money all matched up. In 20 months we had the £1 million, and then the rest of the money came in, so that in April 1992 we were able to move into this building, which was 10 years after the original launch.
I was one of the first nurses to start all the team, had a 2-week training before it opened, so we all got to know each other, got to know the teams, put in the right teams. Well, I was on the ward for 4 years, and it was general care for patients, assessing sort of their symptoms, working with the doctors to make sure they were as comfortable as possible, pain-free as possible, basic nursing care, washing patients. It was so nice to be able to offer that, and families could come in and be with them and be their families rather than, their carers, and have that special time with them, really. It's a huge privilege to work here, to work alongside an incredible team. I think everybody I work with and talk to have the patients at the centre of all that they want to do. So much change has happened. So many more patients have been referred, we're getting younger patients, we're getting more complex patients, so we have had to grow and adapt and learn new ways of looking after people.
You look back and you think, gosh, this was extraordinary. It was of its time. You just had yourself and this small, kit of resource, seeing the sort of growth and development of both your profession as a nurse change and develop, as well as palliative nursing become its own specialty with its own degree, which I feel very privileged in being part of, and also locally seeing the charity continue to grow enormously, and the generosity of the people who have given to that service over the years, and given because they've received care, but also given because they believe in it, is phenomenal. A very wonderful thing for me to reflect on just these 35 years is what's next.
I think hospice care would be nothing without the support of the community, not only financially but also in terms of their time and commitment to us. Thank you, from my heart for that. But it comes back to what we provide for people at the end of their lives, and we need to make sure that we're here to do that and to develop it further, because if we don't, who's going to do that? And what's going to happen to those people at the end of their lives?
November of last year, my beloved wife Elizabeth was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. We were told we don't think we're going to make Christmas, like 3 weeks away. She said, well, I'm coming home. And all the arrangements were made. We had her home within 24 hours. My kids were able to come back and forth and so on, despite living at some distances. The hospice care nurses worked so well with the district nurses, apart from one difficult night in 22. Her symptoms were controlled, she was pain-free. There was one night before Christmas, and I was pretty sure she was going to die that night. And I said to the kids, I don't think Mummy will make it. Anyway, about 8:30, she opened her eyes and said, I want to go to the Christmas market on the Cathedral Green. We had an hour and a half at the Christmas market with her spending everything she had. And I remember saying to her, why are you buying Christmas decorations, honey? Because you know you're not going to need them. And she said, yes, but you will next year. And that epitomises what good end-of-life care can do. It's going back to that lecture from Dame Cicely, that the last bit can be lived to the full. Everybody who over 40 years have given money, time, energy, expertise, we are all just hugely grateful. So please go on enabling hospice care to do what it says on the tin.